and a very warm welcome to you back to another episode of Make It Sunday. My name's Sarah Gray from Funky Fossil, and this is week 50. I just noticed when we're setting this video up, this is our 50th make on a Sunday, so I hope you've been enjoying them, and if you haven't seen all 50 episodes, definitely check back on the channel to see what I've been up to over the past year, or virtually a whole year. Today I thought we'd have a bit of a play with some textures. So I've made a kind of a wall panel. All of this has been made from MDF, but the kind of things that I want to show you today are really using kind of textures, highlighting them, bringing them out with your inks and your paints, scratching in and just creating some really lovely abstract finished pieces. I haven't stuck this down, so I'm going to lift it up like this, just so you can see how fabulous the textures are in these pieces. So they could be like mini landscapes, they could be whatever you want them to be, and they're really, really easy to do. So I thought I'd take you through the process I use to create something like this. The MDF I've created, these are 3-inch squares of MDF, so I'm going to put a pack of MDF in the shop as a Sunday Makers bundle, and I'll probably have 6 of these and one of the backboards, just so you've got the option to create a larger piece. But equally, each of these as individual pieces would work beautifully in a square frame as well, so you'd have lots of potential with a pack like this. And I like working with the MDF, partly because it can take all of the various mediums. You don't get warping and buckling, and you can just keep going with it. You can just keep layering up. So it's really forgiving base to work with, but not so expensive. I don't feel like I've kind of gone all out and I'm working on canvas. I don't feel this is as intimidating for me personally. So this is a really fun and easy make. What do we need to kind of get effects like this? So obviously we've got the MDF, you're going to need gesso, you also need some black paint. I'm just going to be using the Deco Art Americana. I've been creating textures into the paint, etc., just with a kebab skewer, so something simple like that. You could use a pokey tool if you've got one for card making. Need some matte medium, because we lay down some book papers on the MDF panels before we cover them up. This is my book that I've been working through for a couple of years now. And to get this fabby texture that you can see at the bottom half of these panels, I've been mixing some plaster of Paris with gesso. Simple as that, because it means I get a kind of quite a lumpy, chalky finish that is exactly what I want to be able to create that kind of uneven surface. So that is how I've created the texture on these pieces. I've used some acrylic inks to add some of the colour, and we can talk through those supplies as we go. But hopefully you'll see that this is a really simple make. The only part about it is the drying time between the various stages, so we better get started, otherwise it will take us all day. So I have already got some MDF panels painted, and what I've done is this is the one I'm going to work on, the example one. I put 3 layers of gesso on this, white gesso. Now I put 3 layers on because the gesso I use, this Liquitex gesso, is a fairly fluid one, and I definitely wanted a really good solid coverage onto the MDF. If you've got a heavier body gesso, then you may only need 2 coats, but it's definitely worth having a good coverage on the base of your MDF here. Partly because what I'm going to do now is paint over the gessoed panel with black acrylic paint, but then I want to scratch into it, and by having a good layer of gesso beneath, then you're not going to scratch through to the MDF. You'll still get a nice white showing. So let's get some black on here. So I've got a couple, as I say, prepared already, so that we don't need to wait for the black paint to dry, although it doesn't take very long, to be honest. I'm just using, Americana, so not an expensive artist quality paint. This is craft paint, but it has really good coverage and is a much more affordable. So big and very scruffy paintbrush, and we'll get this down. Now, as you saw from the finished sample I showed you at the beginning there, quite a lot of what we do on these panels won't be visible in the final result, but I think starting with black means that you've got some texture and depth when you put your book pages and your kind of gessoed paste, your gesso paste down. It's great to have that kind of dark undertone beneath the layers that you create. So you can see just that one layer of the Americana has done the job for us there, and it will dry really quickly. And of course, when you're working on multiple panels at the same time, by the time you've got one set of panels done, then normally the paint is dry. And when it is a bit drier than this, what I've done here, and again, a lot of this isn't necessarily visible, but it's quite useful to have some scratch marks or lines in your very bottom layer, because you never know what is going to show through. So adding interest to every step of the way just means that you're going to have something in the final layer that is going to be interesting to look at. So just using my kebab skewer, and you can see how easy it is to just pull back to get that nice white undertone from the gesso. Now you could do a very organic scribbly line or straighter, more kind of geometric lines like I'm doing here. Obviously not geometric in that they're straight, but you know what I mean. More angular, I think is probably a better description. And then that just needs to dry, and it will take literally seconds to do that. What I've done then, on the examples I've shown you, and I've managed to get black paint onto this base and onto myself, of course, is I then add a few elements of collage, and I'm using just neutral paper here in terms of the book paper, because I'm just wanting, if there is anything that's going to show through, a bit of text will work great. Let me show you, if I can, one of the, so it's really subtle, I don't know if you'll be able to catch it, but there is, you can just see some of the text here. And of course you've got that choice when you're putting your gesso paste over the top as to actually how full a coverage you make over that book paper. And I'll just, you can put them in different places on each of the panels, so you don't really want to create three identical designs. You want each of them to look a little bit different. So for example, that will work. And we'll just put some matte medium on a brush, and we'll get these on. And of course, by putting the matte medium on, that will seal them as well. Seal the paper, which, I mean, we can work on top of it and it isn't going to struggle. So this is, again, using the Liquitex matte medium. Is again a very fluid medium, but I like that in terms of getting book pages down, and it's a matte medium as well, so as you saw from the distress style of these makes, I'm not really wanting too many shiny finishes to show through, so matte is good. You see I'm being very generous for the size of panel, and we'll put, actually I'm going to put that side down because it's got more text showing. And that's that. So I'm going to let all this dry. I'll put the book pages on the other two panels. I quite like having 3 or 4 on the go because it can keep you moving. The drying time doesn't feel as long then, and also if I'm working with more panels than I ultimately need for one finished piece, I've got a bit of choice at the end in terms of which ones I actually want to use on the final bigger display. So let's let this dry, wash my brushes, and I'll be back with the next stage of the process. Book pages are pretty much dry and stuck down now. They're not completely bone dry, but I think they're dry enough for us to be able to put another layer of medium on top of them. So as you can see, I've varied the placement of the papers just to give me various layout options in terms of the final panels. So now's the fun bit, which is mixing up our textural paste that's going to create that kind of fabulous finish. And I've got, let's say this is just plaster of Paris that I bought on Amazon. So nothing very expensive or fancy. And I've got my Liquitex gesso. So I don't have any formula for this. I just keep adding the plaster of Paris until I've got a consistency that I really like. So lifting some out on my palette knife, you can see here. And it's back and forth in terms of if it goes too dry, I add a bit more gesso, and on we go. And it depends as well, in fact it's too dry already, it depends how fluid your gesso is in terms of the kind of the amount that you'll need to get a nice thick, I want a fairly lumpy texture. I'm not looking for a smooth paste here. I'm looking for something that's going to be like effectively kind of give me lumps and bumps on my finished project. So that's now needs probably a little bit more. That probably will be enough. I don't know whether I'm using here, by the way, one of those kind of disposable palettes, so it's not going to absorb the paste while I'm mixing it. I think I could even have a little bit more. I'm going to spend all day watching me adding liquid and then adding powder because that's now too dry. Oh my Lord. Right, last addition here. It's like mixing concrete, isn't it? Not that I'd actually know, I've never mixed any concrete. Probably just as well given this. There, I think I'm kind of happy with that. So, you see I've mixed it with my palette knife, so I've got plenty on there to be able to pick up. Just separate these out. And what I'm wanting to do on the base that I'm working on is really, you can see how I want to create almost like an Artex ceiling, I guess, create that kind of textured finish. So that will stand and dry with that texture in place. And I'm liking those kind of the little kind of uneven areas. Again, it's quite nice if it's not all the same height and depth. So I've got my text for higher up on this panel. Oops. So, not necessarily always looking to cover the whole thing. And this is why it's nice to have several on the go, because you just don't know what you're going to get. Another skill I don't have, and I don't, so I'm making this suggestion that it's probably a bit like icing a cake, but I've never iced a cake, so please ignore that if it's totally irrelevant. So I put quite a lot on that one, but there'll be some text showing at the top, which we're going to put some paint on the ultimately when this is dried, and we've added we've kind of put a wash over the textured areas to bring out that texture. I then put some paint around the areas that are currently uncovered. So again, I'm not suggesting this will necessarily show, but at least we've still got some text showing at this stage. So here, I'm wanting almost to get a little bit of movement in. As I say, those thicker and thinner areas just will really kind of be brought out when we add our texture, add our ink in the next stage. So, and then we'll go with the fourth one here, and that will just about work nicely with the amount of paste that I'd mixed up. And this one. And you could be much more intentional and considered. So if you wanted to have these as kind of 4 very specific designs that are going to work together. For example, I've showed you my sample of 3 on a panel, but you could put kind of 4 together. So you might want to then think about the configuration that you'd put them in and how you would therefore want to add your texture. But as I say, I'm not wanting to kind of think too hard at this stage. I'm really just enjoying playing with the textures and working with what that gives me. So there we go. There's loads on there. So now we're going to need to let these dry, because they do need to dry kind of really solid, so we can start adding wet medium over the top. But I think you get the idea. You can see how much texture there is, and we'll be able to bring those out. I'll be using some acrylic ink as a wash. You could use acrylic paint over the top, and of course they would look amazing as well with that texture brought out with some waxes too. So there's a lot you can do to really kind of make these really dimensional. But for now, we need to wait for it to dry. So I shall be back in a second. Well, it will be in a second, but I don't know how long this will take to dry. Maybe about half an hour. And we'll get on to the next stage. Well, I've been adding colour, chatting away, and then realised that I hadn't pressed record. So it's a good job we've got 4 panels here, isn't it? Because I can go back and do these steps on the 2 that I haven't started adding colour to. Sorry about that. But you can see how they're starting to develop with the colours being added to them. So I've left it probably just over an hour. And the ones that I did previously I left overnight, so I can still feel a tiny bit of kind of coolness in the on the surface, which suggests there's still some moisture in the paste. And in fact, when I was adding the acrylic ink and water over the top of this one, you can see it started to soften out some of the peaks. So we've got quite defined sharp lines there, and then hit this area here. You can see that it started to kind of soften because I think the paste still wasn't completely dry. And all I've done here is added my acrylic inks, and then once that was dry, went back over with a bit of heavy body white paint, just with my fingertips on the surface, just to bring that texture back out, because I felt it was getting a little bit lost. I haven't done that yet to this one, so we can see what look that gives us. And the other thing that I've noticed is with the acrylic inks that I'm using, I'm fairly sure I'm using the same colours as I did previously. but they're coming out a lot darker than the ones that I'd done start with. I suspect again it's because the paste is probably a bit damp still, so it's absorbing that colour a lot more quickly rather than kind of allowing me to remove quite as much as I was doing the first time around. So I'm liking the effect it's giving me, and I like the kind of the depth of colour, but it's certainly worth being aware of. I think you're probably best leaving the paste overnight to be completely solid and dry, so it won't absorb the colour so quickly, and B, it won't soften as you're working over the top of it. All that being said, I'm going to carry on and do what I have been doing, because I might as well end up with 4 panels that have a similar look rather than leaving it until tomorrow. And also I'm super impatient. So the inks I've been using are a turquoise and a sepia acrylic ink. I'll start with some turquoise. And this again is really trial and error in terms of getting the coverage or the effect that most appeals to you. Because acrylic ink is obviously a very fluid medium, you'll see that it will, of its own volition, kind of move and travel around the peaks that the paste has got on the panel there. But I don't necessarily want anything quite as intense as this from a colour perspective. This is also a really messy activity as well, just so you're aware. So I've got some kitchen towel, and I can go in and just lift some of that off. And you can see, and this is why I think the paste is still a little bit damp, you can see where it initially landed. It's kind of almost been absorbed by the paste, and it hasn't travelled quite as much as it would have done previously in terms of not being sucked straight in by the substrate. So we'll see how we get on with some sepia. We can go backwards and forwards with this process. As I say, it's a very forgiving one. You can't really get it wrong. It's more about just playing with it until you're happy with the look. I did a lot more water this time, so really I want to go back in with more, because I've pretty much lifted all that colour back off. The other thing I found, you see, I might well have flattened that there a little bit, maybe not. The other way I found, which is a very messy way, but of kind of helping that ink to really highlight the textures, was by going in with my fingers and just smoothing over the surface of the paste, and just letting it kind of do its thing, but just helping it go where you want it to go. And I feel like that's already kind of showing a lot more of the texture there, isn't it? But if ever you think, oh, it's too much, it's too dark, then you can just go back in with the kitchen towel. You could even use a wet wipe. I'm going to avoid doing that just now. Well, actually, I'll try it just to show you. You could go in with a wet wipe, almost a bit like a glaze, but as I say, I don't want to make this surface too damp, because I'm nervous that my paste might start collapsing in on itself a little bit. Should we go in with another? Let's go in with some more turquoise. I've got these kind of two, they're almost like lakes in the mountains, aren't they? Let's go in with a bit more. And we'll see. How that travels. So I could just leave it to dry without taking any off. going to be too turquoise now. Or maybe not. I like that. So as I say, it really is playing with it until you get the kind of the coverage or the colour combination that works for you. And so let me show you on this one that's dry how you can further then accentuate the textures. If you feel you've lost them with the colour, the way that you put the colour down. I've got some heavy body white acrylic here on my finger. I'm tapping it off because it's almost like applying a wax. I just want to bring those peaks back out. And because it's acrylic ink, it shouldn't reactivate with the application of the paint. This is where it's one of those processes where you may find, oh, actually I've taken now too much of the colour away, and you go back in and backwards and forwards until you're happy with the look. But I'm liking this kind of white. It almost kind of looks like snow on the mountain tops. So can you see? I hope you can see what I was doing there. How that's brought that kind of texture back out. And so you can keep doing that, but if you feel that you've gone too far, then once that's dried, once that kind of white paint has dried, just go back in with some more acrylic ink and just let the surface build to the final look that you're going for. I'm going to step away from it now before I make it all white again, but I like that. Okay, so I'll do the fourth one off camera, and then we'll come back when these are all dry to add another layer to our textured panels. So we've got the acrylic inks down on all 4 panels now, and I think they look really cool. They just look like kind of, I don't know, world views of mountain ranges, or some kind of aerial views of landscapes. I've highlighted or run over the kind of the peaks of the paste with some white acrylic paint just to bring those back out. I didn't do that in these original ones, so I'm interested to see how that will look in the finished version. It gives it certainly more contrast. So what I'm going to do now, because this does need to be left to dry for a little while, is I'm going to now add paint over this dark area at the top of the panel, each of the panels, and I'm not doing this with a brush. This is all about texture and kind of being quite loose and seeing what the mediums do on the substrate. So back to my cake decorating, or my non-existent cake decorating. You can see it's a good heavy body paint here. I'm just going to spread it on to the panel as if I was buttering bread, and you can let it go in and out a little bit. You don't want to cover over the texture that you've created on this bottom half, but allowing a little bit of that kind of white just to seep in or catch some of those textures will look good as well. And I'm just gonna, because it's a heavy body, it will just hold its shape. I'm not wanting to create as much of as many peaks as we had at the bottom half, but I am wanting it to have a nice, slightly uneven look, because we'll be able to catch that with the with the paint when we glaze it in the next step. So you can see how, I mean, it already looks really effective, doesn't it? Just leaving it white. The other thing I did in my original ones, which again is totally optional as to whether or not it's the kind of thing that you would like to see in your finished version, but got my kebab skewer and I simply just, you can see actually this is probably a little bit too thick. Can you see? Because it's not really what I'm wanting to do. There we go. Is get back almost to the layers below. So I've probably got this paint on just a little bit too thick. So it's all wet. We can just smooth that back over again. Maybe take a bit off. And again, so you can just keep reapplying this, or reapplying it or smoothing it until you're happy with the look that you've got with your pointy tool. Let's try that again and see whether that's, and also it probably works a little bit better if the paint's just starting to go off, so it's not quite so fluid. But we'll see whether we can, that's better. I'll say better. Let's see. That's it. And I'm taking the kind of paint off the end of the skewer as I do it, because I'm wanting to, if I go back on myself, I'm kind of reapplying the paint. And this is totally optional in terms of whether or not you want to do it. So I just think it's a nice way of accentuating the textures and the depth that you've already got. Can you see? So I'm going to leave that to dry, and I will leave this overnight. She says fiddling with it some more. Because I want this this paint to be completely dry, and to dry in this quite textural way before we come back and add a bit of glaze to finish the panel off. So I'm going to do the rest of these while I've got the paint out, and I'll be back once we've got everything nice and dry, ready for that final stage. So I've let our panels dry overnight, and as you can see, we've got fantastic textures in there. The paint, the acrylic white paint, we put it on the top of the panels is completely dry, so hopefully the wash that we've put over the top now won't kind of sink in quite as much as the acrylic inks did on the paste when it was still damp. But everything's nice and hard and dry, and I do like the scratch lines that I've put into the white paint. Again, that's completely optional. It's just a kind of totally a personal choice as to whether or not that look appeals to you. So what I've done ahead of time is I have just mixed some white, some teal, and I think it was a very, very, very tiny bit of Payne's grey. Try and get a kind of a dullish pale blue. I was kind of going for something along the lines of the panels that I did previously, but they've got a slightly greener tinge. We'll see how this goes down, because of course, as with everything throughout this whole process, you'll have heard me say we can work back over the top of it, we can add some further colour in, or mute the colour down. So it really is a game of trial and error, and because you're on MDF, you really can kind of keep going for as long as you want to without worrying whether your substrate will take the various layers. So what I've got here is just damp baby wipe, and I'm going to pick up some of, I mean, I've got way more paint here than I need, but my mixing is so haphazard that I always end up putting down way more paint than I need. I'll put that on some spare paper for collage later. So just picked a bit on my damp baby wipe, and I'm going to just rub that over the white area on the panel. You can see it's kind of picking up the textures, leaving a subtle level of colour, so it's taking that white away, and that's exactly what I want. I want it to not look so stark, but almost kind of add a final bit of a glaze, and it will just pick up the kind of the various marks that your palette knife left when you were kind of laying that acrylic paint down. So we'll just do it again on this one. And because you're putting this on with a damp baby wipe, then if it goes anywhere and you feel it's gone on too heavy, you can literally, see, just remove it and take it all back. So this is really forgiving. It just gives you plenty of time for play, and back with that to and fro of getting a feel for how much colour you want, where you want it to sit, and adjusting it as you go. So I think that, yeah, I like that one. So I'm kind of going for, I've decided these look like kind of the aerial views of kind of landscapes, and I'm kind of going for a soft, airy kind of sky look around here, but wanting them to, in keeping with the whole panel, the look that I'm going for, I want it to look a bit grungy, imperfect, and it's telling the story of the layers you've already put down. So hopefully you can see that. So I'm not going for I'm not aiming for solid coverage here. You absolutely could paint over the white with another colour and go for something solid. You could have not used white as this layer and scratched into a different colour. So I'm just kind of really sharing my ideas in terms of the technique here. And if once it's dry, you feel, oh, it's a bit pale, just go back in, add some more. Although I don't think I'll be able to mix this colour again. It took me about 3 gallons of paint. It's got a bit tired, that bit. And although initially I wasn't planning to put that white acrylic paint on the raised areas of the panel, I really quite like that now. I do think it adds to that look of mountain ranges. And my edges are quite uneven, where obviously I've been kind of very generous in terms of layering up paint and paste. You'll be able to sand that back if you want a nice sharp edge, or if as I'm doing here, you're going for something that ultimately looks quite rustic and distressed, then it doesn't really matter if it looks like it's been kind of unevenly plastered. So I think let's put those together. That's got a bit of a glare to it. There we go. So there we have it. 4 kind of abstract landscapes is what I'm calling them. That's what I'm going with. That you can then either mount as individual pieces in a square, a nice square frame. You could mount as a set of 4 on a bigger MDF panel, or as I'm planning to do here when I get to glue it down, is you could be putting it onto a vertical panel. And all I did on this MDF is used obviously some acrylic paint, painted it black, and then I used a Liquitex crackle paste over the top. And then once that had set, again, it was another overnight job, I then just really went backwards and forwards with this with acrylic inks and paints until I got the level of it kind of being really distressed and grungy that I was happy with. So for the Sunday Maker Bundle, as I say, I'll put together a set of 6 of these panels, of the square panels, and one of these backboards as a kind of a package for you. So you could do 2 sets of 3, or you could do a set of 4 and some individuals. You've got various configurations you could work with, but at least it gives you plenty of these 3-inch panels to be working on and not feeling that any one is overly precious. I'll also put the 3-inch panels, the 3-inch squares in as a set on their own, because it could well be that that's a substrate or a size that you're wanting to stock up on and use more regularly in your own project. So I'll put the link in the description box below, but I really hope they look really different, those two side by side, don't they? But exactly the same process. So you can imagine you're never going to get the same outcome twice. A bit of acrylic paint, a bit of basic collage with book papers, that fantastic texture paste created with the gesso and the plaster Paris, and then just acrylic inks and a little bit of kind of mark making, and you've got something that I think looks really unusual, and I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you enjoyed the process. So join me again next Sunday. I'll have another project to share with you. In the meantime, if you could like and subscribe to my channel, that's fabulous. As I say, there are now 50 episodes in our Sunday series that you can look back on and rewatch. And thank you again very much for being here. Enjoy, be creative, and I shall see you again very soon. Bye for now.